Thanks. Thanks for showing up. It's good to see all of you, and it's a real honor to be around so many innovators and entrepreneurs here today, and Europeans. So I don't know if you know, but Shazam's actually a European company. We started it in London, and we started it 13 years ago in the year 2000. So it's a lot older company than people realize. So my name is Chris Barton, and I am the original CEO and co-founder of Shazam. And today I thought I would tell you a few stories about some of the challenges we faced and some of the lessons we learned as we built the company. So this quote from one of the venture capitalists that we raised money from, I really just thought it's a quote that really stuck with me when we were raising money. And in a way, it became sort of a motivator to prove them wrong. I was determined to build a company around this concept, and that was a real challenge. Many people thought that Shazam was just a feature or just a novelty, or something that people wouldn't use on a regular basis. And so, in a way, this quote became kind of a core foundational motivator for me to try to make that business successful. Many people ask, where does the name Shazam come from? Shazam's actually in the dictionary. The word is an exclamation, and it means when you're conjuring magical things. So for example, if I were to teleport myself from San Francisco here to Vienna right now, and I just appeared on stage, I might say, Shazam, here I am in Vienna. So we really thought that was a great word for something where you kind of magically identified music. And interestingly, to this day, all these years later, that concept of magical experiences is a core part of the product strategy of Shazam. The company wants to build these magical experiences on the mobile phone for users. So this is a little background on where Shazam is today. It's taken quite a few years to get there. And I won't go into the detail, but really the headline message for me from this was just the challenging times that we were in when we started the company. We started Shazam in 2000, as I mentioned, and it was a pretty difficult time to start a company. The internet bubble had just popped, the stock market had crashed, venture capitalists had all decided that they were not going to invest in any consumer-focused businesses. And in particular, mobile was really not even on the radar for investors. And so we pitched to 110 venture capital firms to raise our round. And it was quite an uphill battle. But since then, we've eventually built a successful business. So the concept for Shazam started with a behavior that I had adopted for years prior to starting Shazam. I used to maintain my own little written playlist of songs that I liked. So as I went to bars and cafes or out with friends, if I heard a song I liked, I would basically ask people, what's this song? I'm curious what this is. And then I would go home and I'd add it to my little list and make this sort of playlist. That was a useful way of building your little favorite music collection. But the challenge was that sometimes I didn't know what the song was that I heard if I was in a bar or a cafe or driving in a car. So I really felt I had this need to be able to figure out what those songs were. So Shazam was more than just a vision around identifying music. We believe that music and essentially audio, ambient audio that surrounded you, was something that could be clickable. So we all click links on websites, but wouldn't it be great to be able to click something that you hear and then to be able to do things after you click that audio? And that was really the vision for Shazam. We believed there was this thing called the music moment. And in the music moment, it was a moment of inspiration. And again, you could be anywhere when this happened. You could be driving in your car, you could be at a bar, at a club, at a cafe, in a grocery store, or even in a laundromat. And when you heard this song that grabbed you, you felt inspired by it. And it was at that time that if you clicked onto that song using Shazam, that would be the entry point into a world of opportunity around that music moment. So we had a vision that we would do things like you could download the song, you could watch the video for the song, you could see the lyrics for the song, you could request alerts to be notified when that artist is going to play in concert or release an album. You might get recommendations for songs related to that song. We even had an idea for a feature back in 2000 that we called Follow Me, where you could say, every time my friend tags a song, let me know what he tags because I like the music that he likes. And you'd be able to follow other users and what they're tagging, kind of in a music form of Twitter. So that was our vision. It took a while to actually get there because of the limitations of the mobile networks that we were on at the time. When we invented this technology, music recognition, it turned out that actually what we had invented was sound recognition. It wasn't our original intention, but it was the way that we solved music recognition. And because we had identified a way to conquer sound recognition in a noisy environment, we could identify not just music, but anything where we had a database of sound. And so that includes, we knew when we filed those original patents back in 2000, that could include TV and television shows, television advertisements, radio, anything that's being broadcast that we could either previously or instantaneously create a database around. And today, Shazam is leveraging that. So Shazam has now moved into the TV space, so you can actually, only in the United States today, you can Shazam any of 160 television channels at any time and start interacting with the shows that you're watching. And in fact, in some cases, the content or the advertisers put calls to action saying, Shazam right now in order to engage with this show right from your mobile phone. And these are some examples of different ways that different content has leveraged Shazam to create this sort of interactive experience and to enable kind of socializing as well, all starting on your mobile phone, using Shazam as an instant entry point to kind of click into that experience that you're watching on TV. It's known as second screen. And then, of course, there has to be a revenue model behind everything. So for the few people that are interested in responding to a television advertisement, and for the television advertisers that really want to connect with the viewers, and they want to find a way to leverage this mobile revolution that's occurring, Shazam's now connecting those. And that's becoming a big focus for the company today as sort of what they call the breakout revenue stream. So as we built this company, Shazam, things were not completely smooth sailing. We faced quite a few challenges. We had this original concept. Wouldn't it be great to just identify a song from your mobile phone? But then the first thing we found out is that actually that was impossible. We went out and we identified that the experts within music recognition were people who were PhDs in electrical engineering with a focus on audio, digital signal processing. We knew there were multiple technologies out there that could identify audio on radio play because it was a nice clean signal, or internet files. But it turned out that in the field of pattern recognition in general, when you introduce two challenges at the same time, often pattern recognition becomes impossible. And those two challenges are noise and scale. So if you had noise over a mobile phone and you had to identify it against a database of 10,000 songs, that might be feasible because you can just throw heavy computational power at it. Or if you had 1 million songs but a nice clean signal coming from a radio station, that might be possible. But combining the noise that comes over a mobile phone with the scale of millions of songs became impossible. So we went to several of these sort of Stanford and MIT PhDs in audio signal processing that we found by doing lots of Google searches and looking at the research papers out there. And we met with them. And unfortunately, each one of them said, what you're trying to do is impossible. There's no one that's ever done this. And we were quite worried. We found a professor at Stanford, and his name was Julius Smith. He was a professor in this group called the Center for Computer Research and Music and Acoustics. And he had invented the algorithms behind the Yamaha synthesizers. And he said, I don't know of any way to do this, but I like the concept, I like the idea, so I'll be your advisor and let's see if we can invent it. So what we did is we pulled together the names of all these PhDs in audio signal processing that we had found. It was a list of about 30 names or so. Most of them had come out of MIT and Stanford because both have programs focused on music. And we sat down with the professor, and he knew them all because it's a small community out there. They go to the same conferences. And we said, can you rank for us the 5 smartest guys on this list? We said we want a co-founder. We want him to be really smart, have a PhD in audio signal processing, be deeply theoretical, and have strengths not only in signal processing but also in mathematics and statistics, because we felt like all those tools would be critical to not just building but literally inventing a new technology. We just literally uncovered these old notes that we had found, the original notes we had taken when he went through the list of the top 5 names. And then, luckily, we got our #1 rank on that list, Avery Wang, as my co-founder. So once we had Avery as a co-founder, the next problem became that he thought it was impossible as well. And he kept saying, I just don't know how we're going to do this. My big focus was to try to keep him motivated and positive and believe in the fact that we were going to be able to invent this. But it turned out there's many, many challenges in, again, identifying music in a noisy environment. So not only do you have noise, but you also have noise cancellation. Technology is built into the mobile phone to eliminate noise, but then also eliminate many of the important features that you're capturing in the music signal over the phone. There was also voice compression. Technology is built into mobile phones that would, again, condense and distort the signal, and that would create challenges for us. The speakers that were playing the music in these various ambient environments, the stereo equipment, can be imperfect, and again, creating, features and problems in the music that create inconsistencies that make this challenge a problematic challenge. There's DJs that are all famous for changing the speed of the songs, which also creates a challenge. And then as DJs moved from vinyl to digital DJs, they were also able to do what's called pitch correction, where they can change the speed of the song and then adjust the pitch back so it doesn't sound like the Chipmunks. And that became another challenge. Reverberation. These are all challenges with the audio that we had to tackle. And then there were challenges in the actual search. So we had to deal with false positives and minimize the times when we would tell you the wrong song. And luckily, it's very, very rare. We had to be able to identify where it is anywhere in the song. You might be Shazamming at the end, the middle, the beginning. We had to be able to tackle that. We had statistical scaling to be able to identify songs against a very large database of music. And computational scaling, which was a big one. Which was making sure that we weren't going to need 20 computers for every time a single user tried to identify a song, or hundreds of computers. So we had to make this very, very scalable. So to give you a sense for the challenges that we faced, I'm going to play for you an audio clip. This is just an audio clip that you hear like from a CD. And then I'll play for you what we would hear over a mobile phone. So we would try to find the salient features in that would be able to allow us to robustly identify that song against a large database. So one day in, I think it was around May or June of 2000, I was on a vacation sailing in Croatia, and I got a voicemail. And the voicemail said it was my co-founder. And he said, "We cracked the code. We figured it out." And he had come up with a way to solve this problem. The way he did it is that he focused on what's called spectral peaks, where essentially are the intense moments of energy in sound. And then he mapped those spectral peaks against both the time and frequency. So we had a three-dimensional, essentially, graph of spectral peaks against time and frequency. And then to speed up our search, we basically converted this into a feature search rather than a time-based search. So we could create an index, just as Google creates an index, so you can have very fast searches across a large amount of information. And then to speed it up even more by orders of magnitude, we did what's called combinatorial hashing, essentially pairing spectral peaks to each other, so that you basically create a smaller set of information, but with the same robustness. So that was the breakthrough, and when we tried it out using all these samples that we collected with our mobile phones in pubs across London, it worked, and it was pretty exciting. So that became the foundation for starting the company and raising our angel round. But then the next challenge. We're in the year 2000, and there wasn't even a market for digital music. In fact, the iPod hadn't been invented. iTunes was 3 years away. And so we're sort of ahead of our time. And that when you're ahead of your time, it can be challenging for building a successful business. In addition, these experiences that we imagined, that I described, this grand vision of the music moment, the clickable audio, and all the amazing things that you'll do after you click into this audio, were not feasible on those phones back then. There was no iPhone. The iPhone was 7 years away. And it was the iPhone had a graphical user interface. The iPhone had the ability to show you the cover art of an album. The iPhone could do all these things like play streaming music. There weren't even 3G networks, so you couldn't stream music. You couldn't stream videos. You couldn't show the album cover. There was no downloadable music market. We were pretty limited in what we could do. And also, there was no app store, which started a year later after the iPhone. So there was no easy way of distributing our experience to users. So this is what we were stuck with. 2002, the most popular phone, the Nokia 3310. 84 by 48 monochrome pixels on a monochrome screen. No apps, no app store. No streaming music, no downloadable music, no videos, no color images, just a few lines of text. That's what we had to work with. And luckily, the majority of the population had mobile phones. Our first market was the UK, but this is what we had to work with. So the initial incarnation of Shazam was that you dial a phone number. You hold your phone up. We answer the call with an interactive voice response system, IVR. We record 15 seconds of sound. We terminate the call, and we send a text message back to your phone with the name of the song. And that's it. Our business model was 50 pence per use. We had to make money. And when you're not free, that also can slow growth. And then we had the idea that let's get a short code number to dial those phone calls rather than a very long number. So we got a 4-digit number, and a creative genius that advised us when we said, which number should we get, 2222 or 1234? He said, why don't you get the 4 digits straight down the middle of the phone, the only 4 digits that are in a straight line on the phone. So we got 2580. And that sounds like a nice, simple, and great idea, but the challenge is that the way to get 2580 as a phone number that initiates a voice call is to enter into a negotiation with a mobile operator. And then the way to get it across all mobile phones in the UK is to enter into negotiations with all 4 mobile operators. And then you have to pray that all 4 mobile operators decide to give you that same number. So that's what we did. We spent almost a year negotiating deals with the UK mobile operators to get this number 2580. And we knew that they treasured some of these numbers because they used some numbers for their own special services, like directory inquiries and traffic information and things. So we were worried that they might like this number since it is the only 4-digit number that is in a straight line on a mobile phone. So we negotiated, but we never told them what number we wanted. We just said we need a short code, we need a voice short code. It was a non-standard product. We need this for this amazing service that you can't miss out on, and if you do say no, you'll be the only operator in the UK that doesn't have music recognition. And then the day it came to signing the paperwork with all 4 mobile operators, they said, so which number do you need? And I said, oh, just 2580. And they said, okay, that sounds good. And luckily, none of them looked at the phone. And so we got 2580 on all 4 mobile operators, and we launched. And so when we launched this service, despite these old technologies that existed at the time, we were able to launch and be available to every single person with a mobile phone in the UK at the day of launch. But that didn't mean we took off, because unfortunately, without app stores and downloadable apps, essentially we had to change behavior, and it was a very significant new change of behavior to tell people to dial a number for 50p and identify a song. So it was a slow growth, but we did get off the ground. So the next challenge is that it turned out there's also no Amazon cloud when we launched Shazam. So we actually had to build, essentially like Google does, we built our own Beowulf cluster of parallel computing and from the ground up, and architected all the software that ran it. So that's our original cluster. To this day, Shazam still runs its own cluster. Today it's on GPUs, or graphic processor units, which are very, very fast and efficient. And then there was the database. So we wanted people to identify any song there is, ideally. And there were no digital databases you could go to back then. That people didn't say, here's our digital database, and there's many companies that do that today. If you wanted to start a music download business, you could just go and sign up with one of these. We needed fingerprints of all this music, and there was no one to go to. So we had to build it from the ground up. And we literally built software to go and create fingerprints of every song that we could possibly find. And to give you an idea of how much music that was, if you went into a Virgin Megastore in London at the time on Oxford Street, and you went in and you went and bought one of every single CD, you walked out of the store, you'd have about 15,000 CDs, or about 250,000 songs. And when we launched, we had 1.7 million songs. So we had a lot of music. But today, Shazam has over 30 million songs. So now it has even a lot more music. And it's just been ingesting more and more music from around the world. But that was always our vision. We didn't want to cut corners on that. We really wanted people to be satisfied that wherever they held their phone up, they would get the answer. So as we built this business, we learned some lessons along the way, and I thought I would sort of share those with you. So the first lesson for me was, obviously the most important thing when you're starting a company is your co-founders. And the obvious things in selecting a co-founder to me were people who are very, very talented, very driven, had complementary talents that were different than your own, and were very high integrity. So I found 2 other co-founders and eventually the technology co-founder, all who had those traits. One of my co-founders, who's Belgian, was, I always like to say, has the productivity of 10 superhumans. One co-founder, the technology co-founder, has 4 degrees from Stanford and just a technology genius that was able to invent the algorithm even though even he thought it was impossible. And one co-founder, Dheeraj, in addition to being a very talented, smart guy, he sort of has a sort of Zen Buddha-like view on life, and that was really, really valuable for us because it kind of kept us grounded during some pretty intense and high-pressure times of the startup experience. So that was a great set of co-founders from my perspective. But the other aspect of co-founders that I think is invaluable was the fact that they're, as I call it, co-experiencers. We're really friends. Because these are people that are not just helping you build a successful business, but you're experiencing it all together, that journey, that life experience of starting a company for several years together. And for example, D-Raj set a rule that if we ever met with a mobile operator, which we did quite frequently, and the meeting went well, which with a mobile operator is just basically saying, yeah, we'll have another meeting, that's a good meeting, then the rule was we had to go straight to the nearest pub and have a pint of beer. And so that was a lot of fun. We actually always stuck by that rule in London. But anyway, my co-founders are still my friends for life, and so I think that this kind of co-experience or concept of co-founders is a really important one. And the reason it's so important is because the experience of doing the startup was such an important part of it. Whether or not it succeeded, I wanted to have no regrets about the experience, and it made it really, really fun. The next learning I had was around simplicity. So many companies kind of pay lip service to simplicity, or I would say almost all companies pay lip service to simplicity now. Simplicity is important, it's critical, it's how we're going to succeed. From the biggest companies like Google and Facebook to the smallest ones, startups, to old world companies that produce devices, mobile devices and TVs. Everyone is obsessed with simple experiences. But I think that in many cases people believe that simplicity comes from simple user experiences, and it does in many cases. But what's really interesting that I've found, and I've spent since Shazam, where I've remained on the board, but I've spent the last 10 years working at Google and Dropbox. I believe that some of the most interesting pieces of simplicity come from groundbreaking engineering and technology. And in the case of Google, it's really simple. You type in a query and you get your result, nice and simple. But obviously what enabled that was just very, very, very hard technology, very hard engineering problems that were conquered. Let's say in the case of Dropbox, you just drag that file into a folder, and again, it looks so simple to the user, but again, what's behind it is really hard engineering to solve a million problems that can cause things to go wrong. And in the case of Shazam, Shazam had actually a lot of competitors at the time it launched, and you probably hopefully don't know any of them. And they all did radio recognition, because that was an easier problem to tackle. So they monitored radio stations, and then when you wanted to use their service, you just had to say to yourself, am I listening to a radio station or not? I don't know. If I'm in a bar, hopefully it's radio. And then if it is radio, I just need to enter the radio station number, and now I know what song is playing. So that was an easier problem to solve, but it wasn't as simple for the user. It only worked on radio, and you had to type in the radio station number. And Shazam worked. It turns out people use Shazam also in bars and cafes and clubs and laundromats and grocery stores and clothing stores and everywhere, hopefully. And so the really difficult problem that we solved created a simpler experience for users, and also it prevented them from having to type in the radio station. So the next lesson that I learned was around delighting users. Particularly for companies like Shazam or even like Google, where you don't have viral growth as you do with Facebook or Twitter. And so you're relying on people telling each other about the service. Then you have to delight them. Because if you actually have to delight them so much that you create almost an emotional reaction from them. And that's why I captured this. This was an early article from when we first launched in the UK, where the journalist starts off by saying, I was a different person a week ago. That's the kind of reaction that you need from a service. That's the level of delight that you have to provide in order to fuel word-of-mouth growth. And in our case, we had to fuel word-of-mouth growth. So I had a great appreciation for delight. So the next learning was around the importance of revenue and how it's like oxygen for the company when you're building a consumer business. So I don't know how many of you know this, but Google's original revenues for its first several years were licenses from Yahoo. Yahoo paying Google to run search. And that's how Google funded its business for several years. In the case of Shazam, Shazam licensed music recognition to companies who wanted to monitor thousands of radio stations, and that helped pay the bills. So having something like that when you're a consumer-focused business to kind of pay the bills in those early years was a really valuable thing, and it becomes like the oxygen that allows you to survive. Another learning was around the importance of this. I love this quote from a teacher: "In effort there is joy." And I really found, as I was mentioning earlier with the co-experiencers, that the joy of the experience, of the passion that we had for building this business, meant that the effort was the source of our joy, and that really meant that regardless of whether the business succeeded or failed, we had been rewarded, and that was a really important thing for building a startup. And just sort of some final lessons. Learn from the naysayers. Many people said this business is not going to take off, it's not going to work. But in many cases, some of the thoughts and the reasons they had were actually lessons that we could apply and say, oh, maybe we should actually worry about that point they're making and solve it. Minimizing reliance on marketing. Marketing is a great way to accelerate your business, but if you rely on it to get customers, it can be expensive. Minimizing reliance on partners. As I mentioned, mobile operators can take forever to close deals with, so we did rely on them, unfortunately, but today Shazam does not, which is great. I mean, mobile operators can be great partners, and that's fantastic for getting growth and for achieving strategic objectives, but if you completely rely on it when you're getting off the ground as a startup, that can be dangerous. Learning to iterate and innovate on revenue models. Shazam has actually iterated its revenue models multiple times, from pay per call to selling music and ringtones to now today with TV advertising. That's something that's very important. That is an important focus among innovative startups. And then the importance of entrepreneurs being great storytellers. You have to convince a lot of people. We had to convince a lot of people when we were starting this company. Employees to join the startup, venture capitalists to fund it, angel investors to fund it, mobile operators to partner with us. And the only way to convince them is to paint a picture of success, and you paint your big vision. And the last lesson is that the tremendous pleasure that you get in doing what people say you cannot do. And there were so many people that told us we can't do this. We can't identify music in a noisy environment. And we proved them wrong. So with that, I thought I would finish off with just my favorite of all time, my favorite TV advertisement of all time. Some of you may have seen it, and some of you may not. But really, it's a tribute to everyone here who is an innovator or an entrepreneur, but someone who kind of feels like they're a little bit portrayed sometimes within the status quo world. They're portrayed as sort of the crazy person, as sort of the misfit. And this video really resonated with me. Are we out of time?
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but are you going to be at the bar backstage?
Yeah,
all right, so we don't have time for questions, unfortunately, but Chris is going to be at the Tri-Fire bar, which is back to us, and there for 20 minutes and answer your questions. So thank you very much, and give it up again for Chris Barton.